Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Morgan and this is my channel, Pisces Paperbacks. And today I'm going to be doing my December wrap-up and talking about all 19 books I read in December 2019. Before I get started on December, I actually want to quickly talk about Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. The last time I did a wrap-up, I was not quite finished this book, so I want to do a final thoughts and tell you that I unfortunately gave Crazy Rich Asians 2 stars. The dialogue was just so stiff and unnatural and I couldn't get over it. I also really hated the entire way Nick handled introducing Rachel to his family, which is like obviously a lot of the book. And my favorite parts were the tangents that the story went on, talking about other people's family trees or how they came to Singapore and how their family acquired their wealth and things like that. I love like really detailed descriptions of fashion and clothing and architecture and things like that. Those weren't the things that really got to me, which I know were some other people's complaints, but I just really didn't enjoy reading this book because the character interactions, which are my favorite things about books usually, they were just so awkward and I hated all of them. Fortunately though, I love the movie, so I will go back and watch that whenever I get a hankering for a Crazy Rich Asians story. The first 5 books I'm going to mention are actually talked about in depth in my last romance roundup where I talked about Tessa, so I'm only going to say the titles and ratings that I gave them and link up above in the sky to my more in-depth review of all of these books. The first is A Week to be Wicked by Tessa. I gave this book 4.5 stars. The next one is Once Upon a Winter's Eve by Tessa. I gave this 3.5 stars. Next up, A Lady by Midnight by Tessa. I gave 5 stars, as well as the next book, Any Duchess Will Do, got 5 stars. And then lastly, Lord Dashwood Missed Out, I gave 3.5 stars. The next book that I'm actually going to be talking about is called Because of Miss Bridgerton by Julia Quinn. This follows Billy Bridgerton as she realizes that she's possibly in love with her next door neighbor, George Rokesby. Billy is a very outgoing, very loud, outspoken woman who helps out on her family's her family's land. Her family's like nobility. She doesn't have like a title or anything, but they have like an area that they're in charge of and, you know, a town that they're in charge of. I really don't know how British nobility works, but her family's always been really close with the Rokesbys, which is the next door family, and she's especially been really close with these 2 younger brothers. But in this book, it's basically her and the oldest brother George realizing that they don't in fact dislike each other and they might like each other quite a bit. This is one of those romances where there's really no plot beyond the romance and the development of the romance, and because usually there's some sort of mystery or a plot device that moves things along. This was purely like day-to-day interactions over the course of about a month where these people fall in love, and it was actually really sweet and I enjoyed this one a lot, so I gave it 4 stars. Next, I want to talk about A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This is a book that I'm sure plenty of you have heard of, but basically in this world there are 4 different Londons. There's Grey London, which is ours, with no magic, and then Red London, White London, and Black London, which have varying levels of magic as well. And these worlds are kind of layered on top of each other with only a few magic users able to travel between. One of them is named Kel, and he gets into a bit of trouble and a kerfuffle and ends up having to travel between worlds with someone from Grey London named Lila Bard. And I actually gave this book only 3.5 stars. It was not my favorite. I just feel like while the magic was interesting and the worlds were definitely interesting and the writing was good, I feel like it all stayed at a very emotionally surface level throughout the entire book. I don't feel like I got very attached to any of the characters in particular. I actually really hated Lila for like the first half of her time, not the first half, but quite a bit into her time existing in the book. I just wasn't a fan of her character. I really did like Kel, but I am a sucker for a hero with a heart of gold, and this book was just okay to me. I don't feel any particular drive to read the rest of the series. I might eventually sometime in the future, but I don't want to read it. It's not any priority for me right now, especially since this book doesn't end with like a cliffhanger, so I don't really need to read the next one. So yeah, that was a 3.5 star read. I did like it, but I didn't like it that much. Next is The Study of Seduction by Sabrina Jeffries. This book is about, I believe his name is Edwin, and he is, you know, a noble in society, and he's asked by a friend to watch over the friend's niece, Clarissa, I think? Yeah, Clarissa. And that is because Clarissa is being pursued aggressively / stalked by a representative of the French ambassador, and because of that situation, he doesn't feel comfortable leaving her without somebody to protect her. And this is about them falling in love. This book, I only gave 3 stars. The writing was perfectly fine. I actually really like Sabrina Jeffries. I've read a lot of Sabrina Jeffries books and enjoy them very much. But my problem with this mainly was that before the start of the book, like previous in her life, Clarissa was sexually assaulted, and she's dealing with a lot of the trauma from that during this book because it is the first time since then that she has been interested or intimate with a man. So a lot of this book is her confronting the trauma that she experienced and the ways that she is uncomfortable being intimate with another person. And I don't know, it's not like a secret. Like, there are many very heavy-handed hints dropped throughout the book, so it's not like a surprise when it's finally revealed that that's actually what happened. I just feel like maybe that should have been indicated a little bit in the description so people would know what they were getting into. I think that Edwin, the way that the character Edwin handles it was really, really good, but I mean, just wasn't super 100% comfortable with the way that it was kind of handled as they continued their sexual relationship with each other. I don't know, I think that was just a me thing. I gave this book 3 stars. It wasn't the most compelling of plots, and I'm probably never going to remember anything about it. So, yeah. Up next is the last book in the Spindle Cove series from Tessa, and that is Do You Want to Start a Scandal? This book follows Charlotte, who is the youngest of the Highwood sisters, which is a family that kind of existed throughout this entire series, and she is now a woman, and she's at a house party, and she sneaks into a room to confront a man named Piers, and basically to tell him that despite all the effort her very embarrassing mother will put in, she's not actually trying to marry him and that he shouldn't worry. Unfortunately, they have to hide in the room when another couple sneaks in to have a tryst, shall we say, and the son of the host of the party overhears the tryst and tells everyone that it was Charlotte and Piers. And so Charlotte is now trying to clear her name by discovering who actually were the secret lovers, and they fall in love, and it's just, I actually really, really liked this book. I only gave it 4 stars, however, which, I mean, that's a good score. That's a good, not score, that's a good rating. That's a good rating, but this is absolutely a me problem. I have incredibly bad secondhand embarrassment issues. Like, I cannot watch The Office. Physically, I cannot watch The Office. And what happened was, there are several scenes in this book where I was just unbearably embarrassed for the characters, and I just had to skip them. Like, I straight up skipped like an entire chapter. Like, the first chapter I did not listen to the second half of because I was just so embarrassed I couldn't deal with it. And that's a me thing, but I can't give it 5 stars as someone who experienced, like, I just can't do it. So that got 4 stars, and I think it was a very good ending to the Spindle Cove universe. Up next is Falling into Bed with the Duke by Lorraine Heath. This book is probably my least favorite romance that I read this week. I might drop the score down from 3 to 2 or maybe to 2.5, and it wasn't like badly written. My problem was that the premise was just weird. Basically, there's a girl named Miss Minerva Dodger. She is the daughter of a very wealthy man who owns like a gambling hall, but she's still like in society. She's a spinster because she's 26 years old, and she's decided she wants to feel the passion of a man, and she finds the address of this place called the Nightingale Club, which is basically a place for society ladies to go to anonymously and find men of society who will have like an affair or a night of passion with them, and it's all anonymous and safe for these women whose reputations could be damaged by having an affair. So she goes and she encounters a man named Lord Ashbury, who's known as Ash, and he basically is like, yeah, we can bang, but first let me take pictures of your legs. And this is because he has nightmares about his parents dying in a train accident. So when he was little, his parents died in a train accident. He wasn't there, so he didn't see anything. He was like away. But he's always had nightmares about his parents, and he assuages those nightmares by taking pictures of ladies' legs. And Minerva was like, nah, I'm not really into that, I'm a bounce. And Ash is like, what a woman, must figure out who that is. And so this book is kind of them figuring out who each of them is, and like getting close and starting a relationship. Honestly, I just thought the premise was so stupid. I couldn't get past it. I thought the sex scene was like absolute trash. And Minerva is constantly talking about how she's never been looked at by a man with interest or passion or love, and it's a lot to do with because she's not pretty and smarter than them. Like, she is too smart for men, and she doesn't feel like being a subdued wife. I don't know. She talks a lot about how she's not really attractive, and I don't think that she's actually not attractive. I think that's like a personal thing. Like, it's never confirmed by another character if she's like ugly. I don't think she is. And the other thing is that she never does anything particularly smart. Like, she can do math. Ash has some sort of dysgraphia, so he has trouble doing math. So, like, I guess she can do math. That's it. So I just wasn't a fan of this one. I think I'm gonna drop it down to like 2 stars. It was just boring. It wasn't good. On the other hand, the next book was good, and that is Dark Lover by J.R. Ward. This is the first book in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, which is a long-running, there's now 17 books, vampire urban fantasy romance series. This was the first one. It is between it is between Wrath, the king of the vampires, and Beth, who is a human, who's a half vampire actually, who's about to transform into a vampire. And her father, who has died now, asked Wrath to oversee her transition into vampirehood. She's 25. She's an adult. It's not weird, and if you think it's weird, like, we all have to have things that we just have to let go. And my thing that I've just decided to not care about is very old vampires falling in love with like 21 to 25-year-olds. Like, I have to draw a line somewhere, and I just can't bring myself to care about that. Anyway, Wrath oversees Beth's transition into vampiredom, and things happen. This book is the first in a very long-running series, like I said, with a pretty complicated vampire lore. So a lot of this book is setting up the framework and the foundation of this entire universe, which I feel does detract from their romance a bit, because we don't get as much time in this book as we do in subsequent books with just the couple and them falling in love. It was very steamy, it was well written, and it does, I feel, do a good job laying that foundation, but it wasn't 100% great, so I did give it 4 stars. The next book in that series is called Lover Eternal, and I gave this book 4 stars as well. This one follows a vampire warrior named Rage. He's one of the Black Dagger Brotherhood people, which is like a warrior class of vampire that's very secretive. It's very exclusive. Each of the vampire warriors is tortured or cursed in some way, or like has like a tortured past. And Rage's thing is that he offended their god. This is another thing. Whoopsies. This is another thing, though, that I thought was really funny about this kind of universe. They can interact with their god. Like, her name's the Scribe Virgin. She wears a cloak, and they can't see her face, and she, like, floats, and it, like, emanates light. But they, like, go to the Avatar plane to interact with her. But she can also, like, come to Earth and go to their weddings. It's very weird. Like, they just, like, interact with God. He offended her, and so to punish him, she cursed him with this beast where every time he gets really angry, he, like, hulks out and turns into a dragon or, like, a giant lizard. And he falls in love with a human named Mary, who is, through different connections, drawn into the world of the Black Dagger Brotherhood and the vampires. I really liked this book. Because the foundation had been laid in the first book, there was a lot more time that could be spent with this couple as they got to know each other. It was just so good. I really liked their relationship. I thought Mary was a really interesting character because she stood up for herself while also being this gentle, supportive person, and she had an interesting history. I will say one thing that I didn't really like about this book is that a plot line is that Mary has, I think, leukemia. She's had it in the past and she's in remission, and then during the course of the book you find out that it is back with a vengeance. And I kind of read a lot of romance for the escapist aspect. Like, everybody has had stuff that they don't really like to read about. I personally just wasn't really a fan of reading about this like cancer diagnosis and the process of all that. So that wasn't great for me. Kind of made me sad. But overall, I really, really enjoyed this book and I gave it 4 stars. Just liked it a lot. Up next is The Institute by Stephen King. This book was a 4-star read for me, and I'm actually going to be doing or posting a more in-depth dedicated review video where I talk about what I liked and what I didn't like. Just mentioning things like the pacing versus like the action-packed last third versus some characterization things. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. I thought Stephen King is obviously a very prolific and very popular writer, and there is a reason for that. He tells a good story, he has engaging characters, he has really interesting ideas. Specifically, The Institute is about children with telepathic or telekinetic abilities that are kidnapped and brought to this place where they are used for their powers, and then a particularly smart 12-year-old named Luke tries to figure out if there is a way to escape. And this is like his story. He's the main character. And I just really liked this one. This one took me a while to read, but I think it was worth it. The next book I want to talk about is, I believe the full name is Code Girls, The Untold Story of the Women Codebreakers Who Helped Win World War II. And I give this 5 stars, which it was very surprising for me because I'm not typically a nonfiction person. I get bored a lot, but maybe that's because I've read like essay collections before. I don't really know, but this book is, as the title says, a nonfiction, not oral history, but a lot of it is, I believe, based on interviews with these women, and it is the story of the women who were hired secretly to be code breakers for the US Army and Navy during the course of World War II. It was just fantastic. It was, I believe, in my opinion, very well structured to have this kind of narrative chronological story to make it feel less like an academic paper and more just like you're reading the story of these women and their lives and their jobs over the course of the war. The code breaking was made really interesting despite the fact that so much of it is just numbers work, which can be, I feel, fairly boring to read in a book if you're just reading about people looking at numbers. But I just loved it. I thought it was really, really interesting, and it was portrayed in such a cool way, especially since so much of it is based on interviews. These women are able to be characters that we follow throughout the course of the war. Throughout the course of the book, there's certain women who were involved in different areas of the code breaking that we go back to over and over again to see how they're doing, what they're doing, how their job has changed, how their job has evolved over the course of the war, and it was just really interesting. I also listened to it on audiobook, which I've never done before for a nonfiction book. Maybe that's the key, but I just liked it overall. It was incredibly well done. Did I say who wrote this? It was written by Liza Mundy. I don't know if I said that. The next book I want to talk about is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This is one of the 2 books that I have physically to hold up for you. And this is the second book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. In the first book, a human named Farah is brought into the Fae world and is forced to stay in the house of the High Lord of the Spring Court. And they fall in love. It's kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling or reinterpretation. At the end of that book, there is an extremely major event that happens, and Farah's trait is changed emotionally, and it's very traumatic. And this book kind of deals with the fallout of that trauma and her post-traumatic stress disorder and the ways that it changes her and her relationships. I was not a huge fan. I give this book 3 stars. I actually really liked the last 100 pages. This is like a very long book. I think it's 624 pages, I believe. And I stopped in the middle because I just wasn't really feeling it, and I decided to read the last like 300 pages in one day, which I was very proud of. I ended up liking it a bit. I think this was very engaging despite the fact that Farah is so vanilla boring. Like, she's so boring. The only thing interesting about her is that she's horny, and I respect that. This book does a good job expanding the world of the first book. You really explore the island that they're on a lot more. You explore the different realms of the Fae and the different people in power and kind of how their magic works, and you meet more of them. You also learn a lot more about the secondary characters that were introduced in the first book, specifically Rysand. I really, really liked the exploration of his character. What a hottie. We're into that. And there's also a sexy scene in this book. I mean, Sarah J. Maas is not one to shy away from putting sex in her books because they're realistic parts of the relationships that she writes. I respect it. Obviously, I don't have a problem with like steamy scenes in books. And I actually thought that part was really, really well done in this book. There was a good bit of build up. There was a chapter, there was a scene a couple chapters ahead of that I feel really set the tension very well, like really well. And that was good. The last like 25 pages of this book gave me whiplash like 6 times. It was very stressful, and I did yell at my friend Hannah, who like lent me this book. I will link her channel up above. I like literally called her and like yelled at her and then had to apologize. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And she was like, "Why are you yelling?" And I was like, "You're right. I'm sorry." But I like this. I definitely want to read the third one, which is, I believe, A Court of Wings and Ruin. I read the first book in this series in April or May, so it's been a while, and I don't want to wait that long to read the third one so that I have all of the facts up here in me noggin ready to go for the next book. After that, I read The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This is my first Ruth Ware book that I've read, and I was really excited about it because I had heard such good things about The Turn of the Key, which I am going to be listening to an audiobook like very soon. And I actually really liked this one. This book tells the story of a woman named Laura, who goes by the name Laura Blacklock, and she is a travel journalist who is invited to go on the maiden voyage of this yacht for very, very rich people. And she witnesses a crime and tries to convince people basically that this crime happened. I actually really liked this. I loved the writing in it. I thought it was really interesting. I liked the characters. There's a scene, I hate the hysterical woman is very stressed out because she just witnessed a crime and is trying to tell people that she saw a crime and has to convince them, but like none of them believe her. Like, I hate that. So I was worried that this would be that, but I feel like that portion of the book ends pretty quickly and they go into the investigating pretty fast, which I appreciated because that's the reason I didn't like The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn, because the whole book was that. This book was really, for me, good the entire way through, and I am giving it 4 stars. What's interesting to me is that the twist end at the end of this, I didn't find shocking. Like, I didn't guess it, but the second they revealed it, like, my mind wasn't blown. I wasn't like, oh my god. I was like, okay, I can see it. Whereas other thrillers I've read this year, specifically The Silent Patient and Behind Her Eyes, there was a time in the middle when it was dragging, but then when we got to the twist ending, like, I was like shook to the core. This didn't have that, so I feel like while I consistently liked this book all the way through, the other ones had lower lows but also had higher highs, if that kind of balances out. So this was a 4-star read for me, but I'm very excited to continue to read Ruth Ware and to continue to read thrillers, because that's not a genre that I've really been interested in before this year. Up next is Lover Awakened by J.R. Ward. This is the 3rd book in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, and this one follows Zadist and Bella. Zadist is one of the warriors in the Black Dagger Brotherhood, and Bella is an vampire of the aristocracy that was introduced in the previous book. I like this one a lot. I think this one was my favorite so far. I was saying that it was my favorite so far, but now that I'm thinking about it, I might like Lover Eternal more. Basically, in this one, Zadist is extremely messed up. He's like the most emotionally traumatized out of all of them, which is very shocking since they're all very messed up dudes. And this book is the third in the series. It's the third I've ever read from J.R. Ward. So at this point, I'm able to really see the patterns in her writing and to see like what I like and what I don't like. And I think what I really do like about these books is that each of the men, despite all having trauma in their history, do have individual voices that I feel like are very unique to each of them, and the rhythm of their thoughts is unique to each of them, despite them all being similar, like tortured past asshole alpha males. At the same time, all of these women are pretty interchangeable. Like Beth and Bella, so Beth from the first book and Bella from this book specifically, I feel like really have no personality. Bella's personality is that she like wants to bang Zadist so bad. Mary was a little bit more individual, I feel like. I still really like this book. My problem with these books is always going to be that there's so many other subplots going on, and there's gotta be some that I don't care about. The thing is, all these subplots are leading up to other books. So there's always going to be these chapters that are following characters that's laying the groundwork for the character growth in the future books, specifically the books where those characters are then going to be in the main pairing. So I can't like not care at all, but when I'm reading about like Rage and Mary or Zadist and Bella, like I don't want to read about this other guy. Like I know his book is next. He can come in another book. He can be the main guy in another book. I don't need this right now. That's really my biggest complaint about this series, which is not even a complaint because I'm excited to read all the rest of the books. Lover Awakened, 4 stars. I also had a bit of a problem with Bella and Zadist, the beginning of their sexual relationship. Zadist is working through a lot. There are, I would say, trigger warnings, and the most trigger warnings in this book for sexual assault and forced captivity. I think in his past, I mean forced captivity, but like captivity, like in his past, very, very stressful to read his flashbacks. But his character growth is also one of the most rewarding and satisfying arcs. I loved the way his character ended the book. I loved their last scenes together, so it was good. Next, I will talk about All This Could Be Yours by Jamie Attenberg. This is a bit different. This is like a literary fiction novel, one of those ones where like a bad thing happens and then the rest of the book kind of is a character study on why each person in a family is fucked up in their own special way. So this particular book is about, starts with a man named Victor, who's the patriarch of this family. He's 73 and he has a heart attack. This book kind of follows the whole family as they deal with his impending death, and we kind of learn as readers about their history, their interactions with Victor, and the way that he so influenced their lives. The characters in this book are his 2 children, Alex, the older daughter, and Gary, the younger son, Gary's wife, Twyla, Victor's wife, Barbara, and then some other characters like his grandchildren or side characters. I liked the writing in this book a lot. I thought the writing, it was mostly short sentences and it was from a really interesting third-person omniscient perspective. So each chapter would follow a specific character, but it could also at any time really deviate into a side character. For example, someone could be shopping and have an interaction with a cashier, and then it could really quickly jump into the brain of the cashier and show their perspective on the interaction, and we learn very quickly about how this interaction kind of plays into the cashier's hopes and dreams for the future. Barbara was the most interesting because, I mean, I don't know if I made this clear, but Victor wasn't a good man. He cheated on his wife and he was a criminal and he was violent and aggressive. He hit his children and he wasn't a good man. And Barbara, his wife, I think her sections were really interesting because it was just this character study of a woman who knew his faults and still loved him. It was just very interesting. I think the epilogue of this book wasn't satisfying. It was too fast and it didn't really give any closure. And I also just don't feel like this is a book I'm ever going to think about again after I'm done reading it. And so I feel like a 3.5 is about where it should be because it was a good book. There's nothing about it that I had a problem. Oh, you know what? I did think it could have been a little bit more subtle with the points it was trying to get across. There's one point where Alex is sitting next to her father's hospital bed, doing her like I forgive yous or goodbyes. And it's supposed to be this improvised thing. And she sits down and it feels like a prepared speech, just way too formal for the situation, and that was really awkward. But I think other like dark secrets in this family's history were revealed very, very well. They were kind of enticingly planted along the road of the book. So I liked it, I didn't love it, and I'm probably not going to think about it again. The last book I want to talk about, I actually haven't finished yet. I am 85% of the way through Becoming by Michelle Obama. Today is the 30th, and I'm definitely going to finish it at least today or tomorrow. I'm savoring the end so that it will be the last book I read in 2019, and I'm telling you now, I'm going to be giving this book 5 stars. I think it's incredibly well written. It's incredibly thoughtful. I've already cried like 2 or 3 times because of just the way this book makes me feel about America, or the trials this woman and her family had to go through while her husband was president, and kind of makes me think about the sacrifices that those in public office make, while at the same time, mostly I was really interested in hearing about the perspective of a woman who I always saw as very self-assured. I was really interested in hearing about a career woman, a woman who, you know, was extremely successful in her field, and how she kind of dealt with this redefinition of her life in relation to her husband. And I just wanted to hear about how she kind of, it's so good to hear about her talk about how she handles motherhood with her responsibility to do good in the world. And it's just, I just really love this book so far. She's so well spoken. I'm listening to the audiobook, so she is reading it to me. And my only critique would be that during the campaign portion of this book, where she talks about Barack's life in politics, I would say the vast majority of that section is just her kind of recounting the timeline of the campaign from her perspective, instead of really delving into some of the problems that I would like to hear about, like her career. She kind of stops really talking about her career aspirations after she gets married, and I would like to hear a bit more about what it's like to have, like, I wanted to know more about her career, since so much of the first half of the book was her talking about how much effort she put into becoming a lawyer, and then discovering that she actually didn't want to be a lawyer, and she wanted to go and be in public outreach or community outreach and work with nonprofits. So I wanted to hear more about that. And once we got to the Barack politics section, we kind of veered away from that. And obviously later she talks about how she took a step down, and she took a leave of absence from her job in order to be this campaign wife that he needed. And I just wish I would have heard a little bit more about her career, because that was extremely interesting, and I'm just very inspired. I know that Read with Cindy read this book as well and was very inspired, and I was very interested. It's interesting to me that we're taking, obviously we're different people, but I like to know that different people can take different things from the books, and Cindy was very inspired by Michelle's career changes and conviction in what she wanted, and deciding to make a change for what she wanted, whereas it's surprising to me because I have no interest in having my own children. That's not really something I aspire to, but I am very interested in hearing about Michelle talk about her family and what it's like to be a very public figure while also being a mother and trying her best to protect the childhood that her children have, while still being the children of such public people. Anyway, absolute 5 stars. We're counting down the minutes until I put that Goodreads score in. So I just wanted to let you know that these are all the books that I read this month. That is 19 books, if you didn't count, 19 books in the last month of 2019, which is also insane because I finished A Week to Be Wicked, the first book I read this month, on December 9th. So I read 19 books in even less than 31 days, which is it's wild to me. And I just had a great month, and I listened to a lot of really good books. And let me know if you've read any of these or if you plan on reading any of these. And I hope you have a wonderful New Year's, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!